nestled in the beautiful Santan Mountains. Marc J. Victor, world-renowned man of peace and attorney for freedom. In a world of coercion and war, a peaceful man stands tall. Now, for your weekly dose of freedom and peace. A peaceful man stands tall. Ladies and gentlemen, the man of peace himself, Marc J. Victor, brings to you the attorney for freedom.
Looks like we had a little unexpected Eddie Money there.
Did you like the, Eddie Money, since I know him and done some great interviews, I had to throw that in at the end.
It's kind of like Show Me the Money.
Correct.
Right?
Exactly.
You never complain when money shows up, right?
I was told today would be the day that if I didn't integrate money into something unexpectedly, like that, the windfall may not come. So.
I think that's what's cool about our show already. We're about 10 seconds old, and already we got cool stuff going on.
That's right. So you never know what's going to happen.
So this is our very first show. It's the Attorney for Freedom show. It's going to be all about peace. It's going to be all about freedom. It's hardcore, no compromise. Bring it on. Not afraid of anything, any topic, any person. You know why? You know why, Joe? We're not afraid of that because we're on the right side of this argument. I think all of human history has shown that when human beings live in freedom and when they live in peace, it benefits everybody. They prosper. They do well.
It's funny. I don't think most, and I would say most, I don't think most people grip what freedom really is. I know I sure didn't until I met you.
It's interesting. Freedom is one of those words. You can go to any group. It doesn't matter what club, what group. It doesn't even matter what part of the planet, what time in history. And you can sort of stand in front of the crowd and say, raise your hand if you're for freedom. Right? Everybody says they're for freedom. In fact, I wrote an article on this. Are you really for freedom? And I could have chosen really almost anybody I wanted. I figured, well, let me choose Hitler. And so I went and I researched some things that Hitler said. And sure enough, there are quotes from Hitler's speech that sound very pro-freedom. So that I looked at Saddam Hussein. And sure enough, there are things that Saddam Hussein said that sound very pro-freedom. I mean, you really can't find somebody who would stand up and say, you know what, nah, I'm not for freedom. But because of that, what we're left with is having to sort of parse down what freedom really means. Because obviously, Hitler, Stalin, Saddam Hussein, they're not on our side. They're not really for freedom. So we need to talk about, right at the beginning, right in our first show, what are we talking about when we talk about freedom? What are we talking about when we talk about peace?
What is it, and what does it mean if you really are for freedom? And everyone think about this, because you need to know, am I for freedom? Are you for freedom? And you have to answer yes to these questions.
Yeah, and I don't think there's one really good, perfect definition that everybody would sort of agree on. I think there's a lot to be said for this notion that freedom is sort of a state of mind. It's sort of this, said very loosely, this sort of live and let live type of an attitude. And, when you start talking about that, you get into things like, look, my good friend Joe here, I would say this. Joe is in charge of Joe. Joe's in charge of Joe's body. Joe's in charge of Joe's money. Joe's in charge of Joe's property. He's in charge of his time. Joe can do whatever he wants. It's Joe's business.
You know what Joe's not in charge of? Which I don't understand, because I do a lot of shopping at Costco and Sam's Club. I'm not in charge of the lady at the door that stops me and looks at my receipt like I'm a thief.
Right.
Is that freedom? I know that brings back a little memory there.
It sure does. But, we need to talk about, Joe being in charge of Joe, Marc being in charge of Marc. To me, that's what freedom's about, right? Everybody being in charge of themselves. And we're talking, of course, about competent adults being in charge of their own lives. And so you have to say, at what point should the law get involved? Well, to me, you can really pick that any point. I mean, I was having lunch with Bill Montgomery this week, who some people here might know is the elected county attorney for Maricopa County, and we sort of disagree on where that point is. But what I would say, and what I did say to him, and what I would say to everybody, the point is generally where one person is trespassing on another person. To me, that's what makes sense. When Joe is hitting Mark over the head with his club, I say, hey, Joe, you're trespassing on me. And that's sort of an anti-freedom type of an act. Another way to say it is some of my friends talk about voluntary transactions between consenting adults. What they would say is, look, if you have a voluntary transaction between consenting adults, it ought to be legal. It doesn't mean that you morally approve. It doesn't mean that it's okay or that it's good or that you like it or that you encourage it. It just means people are in charge of themselves.
Somebody up on the chat says, define person. Define that.
Well, that, of course, could get into questions of unborn people, but I think we're talking about, for purposes of today's discussion anyway, we may get into abortion. We're not afraid of any discussion here, but I think that when we're talking about freedom and rights, we're talking about competent adults, because children, they're not part of the sort of what we're talking about in terms of freedom. They have rights, they have certain rights, but they're not free to sort of chart their own course and make decisions over their lives because they're not truly competent yet. They're minors. And the same, I would say, with adults who are not competent. They need guardians, people who can be in charge of them. Of course, ferreting out those questions can be difficult. I don't agree necessarily with a hard and fast, you're 18, bam, and now you're an adult, and you're 17 and 11 months and you're still a minor. I think that's something that reasonable minds can disagree, and I think the same can be said for adults who might not be competent. But if you're a competent adult, you're in charge of yourself.
And I'm going to jump in here occasionally and just let you know what some of the people on the chat are saying. One person said, and the one that said defined person said, nice evasion for the moment. And then somebody else came up and said, who's defining competency?
Well,
Who determines competency?
Actually, I would like to know why they say that's an evasion. I would say, bring it on. What are you talking about? I mean, do we?
If you want to call in,
yeah, call in. I mean, what are we talking about? People who are not yet born? Are we talking about animal rights? I don't know what we're talking about. So,
and let me give you the number here if you want to call in: 480-745-1033. Feel free to call in and ask any questions or comments. And if you want to call in and not drop the F-bomb and just be cool, contain yourself, which I'm sure our fantastic listeners and people watching out there will do, I'll be happy to put you right on the air, and you can talk to Mark and decide if you are for freedom.
Yeah, and the reason we're doing this show is to promote freedom. So, as fun as it is, Joe, to sit around and talk with our pals about freedom, and we all agree on freedom, I'd really rather talk to the people who don't agree. I'd much rather talk to the people who support big government, the people who want to control other people's lives. Those are the people that we need to reach, because we're getting to a point now in our society where it's going to be make it or break it for the people of freedom. The people who are for freedom, now it's time really to stand up and take a stand for promoting freedom. And of course, if you're going to talk about peace, and ultimately that's where I'm going, I like to think of myself as promoting peace. I don't think you can even talk about peace until you're talking about freedom. Because if people are living in ways where they're coercing each other, you can't even talk about peace yet. You don't have freedom. To get freedom, you've got to have a situation at least where people are respecting the rights of other people to control their lives, to control their property, to control their bodies. And I don't really see, some people say, hey, Mark, this freedom thing, you make it so complex. It's really not. I mean, truthfully, I don't mind being called a radical, but we're really not radical. We're really pretty simple. All we're saying is, look, you're in charge of you and I'm in charge of me. I leave you alone if you leave me alone. The government shouldn't be involved until one of us is trespassing on the other. Why is that so difficult? I'd love somebody to call in and tell me why that's so unworkable.
We just had a call in from Jared out of Wichita, Kansas, who said,
great.
I live in the U.S. and I am free. I am freedom. Obama is for freedom. There's our first one. And welcome to all of you on the chat up there, posting different articles of yours and all different things up there. I want to welcome everyone, Jackie, Caston, Zunwag, all of you folks that are up there chatting. And I've got the phones off for a second just to hear this response.
Well, look, just like we talked about at the beginning. I mean, Obama is for freedom the same way these other people are for freedom. I mean, he claims he's for freedom, but at the end of the day, he supports a big giant drug war, right? So, I mean, if you're going to support a drug war, how on earth can you possibly claim to be for freedom? I mean, and to me, the drug war is sort of a defining type of an issue, because what you're really saying is competent adults don't have a right to control their own bodies. And if you can't at least say people are in charge of their own bodies, how on earth could you possibly be for freedom?
So you're saying that you're not for the drug war, Mark?
I'm saying, not only am I saying I'm not for the drug war, I'm saying I don't see how a person could possibly say they're in favor of the drug war and still claim to be for freedom. I don't think it's possible. I think it's that much of a defining, fundamental type of an issue.
So I don't understand. What you're saying is, you should not be able to go and grow marijuana or smoke it if you want. It's a plant. Shouldn't the government tell us we can't grow plants? I mean, roses, I can't say that I love them. Look, maybe they should outlaw that, growing roses.
Look, Joe, the government tells you everything to do. Write down how much water's in your toilet when you flush it.
I eat those damn things. I eat those roses, and I think I cop a little buzz. I'm not sure.
You may have. But maybe that explains some things. I don't know.
It's very close to banana peels.
I don't know if you're aware of this or not, Joe, but last night at midnight, and I saw this at CNN this morning, last night at midnight there was this giant public group party in Seattle, Washington. Do you know why?
Tell me why.
Because at midnight last night, the new law completely legalizing marijuana for all purposes, including just recreational, having fun, whatever you want to do with your own body type purposes, became legal at midnight. And so to celebrate that event, which I see as a very substantial...
Where was this again, Mark?
Seattle, Washington.
Gotcha.
Last night at midnight, lots of competent adults, peaceful competent adults, took to the streets and in a peaceful way smoked marijuana publicly and celebrated their newfound freedom.
I thought I saw a big smoke cloud kind of coming this way.
Which, by the way, it's a little inaccurate to say it's a new freedom. I would say it's a reclaiming of an old freedom. I mean, really, people think that we've had this drug war forever, and that's just not the case. I mean, the drug war really didn't get started until the late 1960s.
Well,
with Nixon.
From what I understand, George Washington, I believe he had to calm his nerves with a little ganja here and there.
I don't know, because I never spoke with George Washington.
At one point, didn't they make it mandatory to grow for the ropes? During a war, they made it mandatory to grow hemp for the ropes during some war.
I don't know, but I certainly...
My short-term memory, I'm having a problem with that today.
Certainly marijuana wasn't the demonized type of plant that it is today. I mean, it's really crazy if you think about it. I mean, of all things, being a criminal defense lawyer for the last 19 years, I can tell you, and if there are any criminal defense lawyers out there listening, I know they'll agree with me on this point. 19 years of doing this, and I can tell you, I don't have one case in 19 years of representing people in criminal cases, not one case where somebody used marijuana and then did some act of violence. I don't even have a case, and I'm not disputing that I'm not saying there's never been such a case, but I've never even had a case where somebody smoked marijuana, became an impaired driver, drove down the road, and caused some kind of an accident. I've got lots of cases like that with alcohol. But, of course, that's not the best reason why the drug war should be ended, and I wrote an article about this. That's on my website, which I probably should say is Attorney for Freedom. What else would it be? Where I talk about ending the drug war, and I gave two completely different rationales for ending the drug war. The first one I called the freedom argument, and really, to me, that's the only argument you need. It's really simple. You're in charge of you. You're in charge of your body. Do whatever you want with your body. As long as you don't hurt another person, no problem. I think that's a perfectly sufficient argument for ending the drug war, and you could stop right there. The good news is we don't have to stop right there. We could talk about the second argument, which I called the consequentialist argument, which really just means the consequences of ending the drug war. But the consequences, economic consequences, public safety consequences, rehabilitation consequences, violence consequences, all of those consequences are so beneficial for our society to end the drug war. And we're just now on the cusp of this, Joe. We're just now, and this is really an exciting time to live because we're on the very cusp of the complete, total, utter collapse of the drug war. Joe, you heard it here first on the Marc J. Victor Attorney for Freedom show. I'm declaring the drug war over. It's happened already. Unfortunately, some of the politicians haven't realized that this thing's over yet. There's still going to be more suffering. There's still going to be more people who die in the streets, unfortunately. There'll be more peaceful people scooped up by the government and planted in cages to live there for years, unfortunately. But the beginning of the end has occurred.
We got a lot of chat going on, and someone out there says, actually the person that asked to define earlier said, personal experience, all of my friends who... It keeps riding here. All of my friends who have smoked pot went up the scale. So he's talking about being an elevator drug, and then there's a lot of comments after that.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment.
Well, let me throw this in really quick because this kind of ties into it here. No, go ahead. Can't even read my own writing. I'm writing so fast.
Well, first off, if adults choose to go up the ladder and use other drugs. This is a freedom show, right? So we could talk about it, Joe. That's their business.
That's right.
I mean, I hate to say it. I mean, I would encourage all of my friends to not use drugs and do things that would be bad for them. I get up early in the morning and I go to the gym and I don't drink carbonated beverages and things of that nature.
So you're saying if someone wants to use methamphetamines, more power to them. Just, do it in your own house. Don't hurt anyone. Don't tell anyone, whatever.
Look, I would
do your own thing.
I would certainly try to discourage people from using methamphetamine as strongly, as persuasively as I possibly could. But at the end of the day, I respect their rights as competent adults to make decisions to control their own bodies. So I stop short. And to me, all people of freedom stop short of laying hands on their neighbors and forcing them, coercing them into living in ways that we personally find appropriate. It's not our business. But secondly, it's just not true, Joe. I mean, there's so many studies on this, and the data just isn't there. There are so many people who use marijuana and don't use other drugs. And you could say
they say 15 million in the U.S. have used marijuana within the last 30 days.
Maybe that's
true. Of course,
true,
I don't know any of them, but they say over 15 million. Sheila from the Bible Belt out in Branson, Missouri says, "Gotta love you, extremists. Let's get all the kids smoking pot." Now, come on, Sheila.
Well,
Sheila.
In a sense, look, the other approach here is that the government regulates everything, the government controls everything. We've tried that approach, and what that's resulted in is over 2 million people in prison, $69 billion spent on this thing last year. We got a police state out of control. The Fourth Amendment is virtually meaningless now. The Fifth Amendment's under attack. The Sixth Amendment's under attack. We're losing our liberties like crazy. The drug war is much to blame for the demise of the criminal justice system. It's overloaded. It's not functioning properly. And, Joe, I do cases all across this nation. I was in Nebraska last week doing a case. I just picked up a case out of Ohio. I can tell you the justice system is completely overwhelmed everywhere. And no matter what they change, it's never going to fix it until the drug war is ended. And so, look, nobody is suggesting, I'm not suggesting that children go out and start using alcohol either, although I'll be the first one to say it. 21 years old is ridiculous.
But you know what I say, Mark? I say educate your kids, because right now, Sheila, your kids might be out at the smoke shop buying some spice, for God's sakes. Yeah. I mean, come on, Sheila. Let's educate our kids. Let's get them so they're not doing these things, and they know it. So they make their own decision when they're old enough.
So whose job is it, Sheila, to talk to your 14-year-old kid? Is it the government's job to raise your kids, or is it your responsibility as a parent? When you decide to become a parent, you got an obligation. Talk to your kids, teach your kids, explain to them what's good for them, explain to them what's bad for them, have them understand what's in their long-term interest. That's your job as a parent. Stop looking to the government to raise your kids.
Bill from Spokane said, "Love the show already. Spread the word. Go, Mark."
And I think it's fantastic, and I would say back to Bill, hey, Bill, look, It's time for us to take back our country. It's time for us to go back and do the things that Thomas Jefferson was talking about, Sam Adams was talking about, Tom Paine was talking about. Those guys aren't here anymore. We need to step up and confront the Republicans and the Democrats and say, look, enough big government, enough regulation, enough taxation, enough trying to control your neighbor and tell them how to live. We don't have to stop at marijuana. We can go on to alcohol. We can go on to all kinds of moral things, right? I don't want my kids getting involved in prostitution, but I damn sure don't want the government telling my kids how to live. We could talk about guns too, right? Now here we are again. We just had another tragedy on the national stage. One of the members of the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't know what's going on in the guy's head, obviously something horrible, shot his girlfriend and then took his own life. And so now here we are again with all the gun grabbers up there on the national stage saying, see, look, somebody did something bad with a gun. Everybody needs to give up their guns. Is that really what America's about? Someone needs to stand up and say, look, we acknowledge he did something bad with a gun, right? People do bad things all the time. Somebody recently pushed another person, I think it was in New York, right, on the subway. Somebody pushed another man on the subway, and we got that awful picture. I think it might have been the New York Times, I don't know which paper it was, ran that horrible picture of this man who was murdered by being pushed down on the train. So should we abolish all trains now? Because trains are dangerous. Maybe we should abolish hands, because the hands were used to push the person onto the train tracks. Look, I'm a peaceful American. I've always been a peaceful American. I'm always going to be a peaceful American, and I'm a firearms owner. I got guns, and I got lots of guns, and I'm keeping my guns. And you know what? I've never done anything unsafe with my guns. My guns are always locked up. My kids have no access. But you know where I'm going on Sunday? I'm taking my kids to the gun range. We're going to the Scottsdale Gun Club, and I'm going to give them instruction. I got a professional showing up who's going to talk to them about gun safety, going to talk to them about these aren't toys. I've already talked to my kids, and I've said, we're going to deal with guns. And I'm going to teach them to be responsible gun owners. That's what real Americans do. They take charge of themselves. They take charge of their kids. They're in charge of their own bodies. They're in charge of their own properties. And we need to stop being a bunch of wimps in our country. Can we stop being wimps? Can we stop looking to the government to take care of us from everything from A to Z, soup to nuts, cradle to grave? Where does it end? It ends in complete and total socialism. And if you think we're going over a cliff this December, wait till you see the cliff you go over when you become a socialist country.
Comment from Roger, Kenosha, Wisconsin, said, no government has taken my guns away.
Good for him.
Mark.
That's right. An American right there. That's an American who just chimed in on our show.
It's Cynthia from Seattle.
The Second Amendment, it ain't about duck hunting. It ain't about duck hunting. It's about Americans have a fundamental right to keep and bear arms. And if you don't like it, too bad. Live somewhere else. There's lots of reasons why Americans might want to have guns. They may want to be collectors. They may want to be hunters. They may, like me, have guns for the purpose of shooting other human beings who threaten imminent deadly harm on them, their family, or their friends. That's why I have guns. There are other Americans who have guns because the government has guns, and the government cannot be trusted. Americans, real Americans, do not put their trust, confidence, faith, and love in government. It's always been an evil. At best, it's a necessary evil. At best. But it's an evil, and it needs to be beat back into the cage where it belongs.
Now, those of you have to remember that this is the first day that the Marijuana Report, our international show, is being switched to a different time to be disclosed over the weekend. So we're getting a lot of marijuana comments. Yeah,
and let's talk to the marijuana people. I got something to say to those people.
One thing from Cynthia real quick out of Seattle. Right. She said, people, right now, I'm relaxing on the couch, enjoying some legal cannabis. Now, I'm not drinking alcohol. But, you know, one thing about alcohol is people get violent. How many people get violent on cannabis? Because I'm sure as heck not violent. I'm sitting here watching the tube, eating a sandwich.
Joe, to make an analogy, lots of people get violent after they drink. I've had lots of domestic violence cases. There'll be lots of them tonight, right?
After smoking weed?
No, after alcohol.
Gotcha.
There will be cases tonight that come up where mostly guys do violent things to the people they love in their lives because they've ingested too much alcohol. And that's a horrible tragedy, and it needs to be dealt with appropriately. But dealing with it appropriately, does that mean we're calling to ban alcohol? Does that mean as Americans we're standing up like in kindergarten and saying, hey, one person misused alcohol, now nobody can have alcohol? Is that the way we are in America? No. We're adults here. There are lots of people who peacefully use alcohol. I'm not one of them. I'm not an alcohol drinker.
You know what? Neither am I.
You know, it's only because I choose not to. And if you told me, Mark, even though you're not an alcohol drinker, the government is now going to outlaw alcohol, I will be the first person in line fighting the fight to keep a substance that I do not use legal.
I'll get a hat with a beer keg, like a little beer keg on it and walk around.
Joe, as crazy as it sounds, it happened.
I just watched the show last night on the Prohibition. It was amazing to watch the police and the politicians coming up, taking their money from the guys, bringing the loads of liquor down. Oh, by the way, you forgot my extra bottle of watermelon moonshine.
Joe, the same knuckleheads, we can call them boobus Americanus, the same knuckleheads who think they can control the lives of everybody by banning things, making things illegal, tried it during Prohibition. At least they had the integrity then to pass a constitutional amendment because they realized the federal government has no jurisdiction to run any kind of a substance war. At least they had the integrity to do that, which we do not have today. But they passed an amendment, they ran an alcohol war, and we know the rest of the story, right? The best thing that ever happened to organized crime, there were gangs, there were those days versions of cartels, there were violence, there were alcoholism went up. The justice system was overloaded. It was a complete disaster. And what was it? Maybe 11, 12 years later, they said, man, did we make a big mistake? Let's repeal the amendment for Prohibition and let's end the alcohol war. Do we still have people who drink alcohol to excess and have problems and are addicted? Absolutely. But you know what we don't have? We don't have the Miller guy and the Budweiser guy killing each other in the streets. We have some kind of controls, not perfect, but some kind of controls over minors being involved in it. If there are disputes between the people who produce and transport and sell the dangerous drug alcohol, guess what? They go to court and they settle it peacefully. And unfortunately, our prisons are not packed with people who are addicted to alcohol like they are right now with people who are addicted to other drugs. This is complete madness. And I'm sorry, but if you want to support the drug war, I would say that position is un-American. It's anti-freedom. It's flat wrong. It's completely indefensible. And it is immoral. It is immoral to try to tell by force another competent adult what they can do with their body. It's flat out wrong, and it needs to end. Get in there, baby. I can't get you into this argument. What do you have to say about the drug war? All right, she's just warming up over there. But, we need to talk about this stuff. We need to get this stuff out of the closet. I mean, what politicians today? We just had a presidential election. We had a big government A versus big government B, right? There was the big government, tax and spend, make the government bigger, expand our empire, tax and spend out of control, Obama. And then there was the big government, tax and spend, keep the drug war going, out of control, expand everything, Mitt Romney. And those two guys had their run for president. Who was it who was standing up and saying, excuse me, hello, we didn't have these problems before we had the drug war. We didn't have these problems. Marijuana wasn't a problem. They didn't even hear of meth. We didn't even have methamphetamine before this drug war.
I want everyone to know this is not a one-sided thing. You call me the biggest ass you've ever seen in your life. I don't care. Let us know how you feel. Let us know. You know why? As Howard Stern said, people that hate it listen, people that love it listen. And that's great, because we just had Jake come on and said, you all suck. He said, I'm from Salt Lake City, and I'm an LDS bishop. You are Satan. You are not a godly man.
Well, that's very sweet, and I'm sure that will...
10 lashes to you, by the way.
It's very sweet and classy of him to make such a comment. I mean, really would have appreciated...
I think he really thinks that you're Satan, and I'm the apprentice.
Well, hey, he's free to think. Hey, that's the nice
You're
thing.
Satanist.
That's the nice thing about being for freedom, right? We can acknowledge as adults that Mr. Bishop in Salt Lake City is free to believe.
That's
Not
right.
only that, he's free to express his opinion, right? Because the First the First Amendment isn't just about things that we like to hear. It's not just about things we agree with. It's about things we completely disagree with. Those are the things we want to hear. So, okay, he disagrees. But you know what? Look, Joe, if you're going to run a show for freedom in America in 2012, the dark times of freedom, the time where the drug war is out of control but ending, times where taxation, government spending is out of control, $16 trillion debt going higher anytime, unfunded liabilities even 4 times that amount. We got problems in the United States. We got the Patriot Act, the NDAA, American searches for Americans are commonplace. If you're going to stand up and talk about freedom in these times right here, where candidates for president of the United States cannot even talk about ending the drug war, they can't even talk about trying to end Social Security. Yeah, I said it. We need to end Social Security. We need to get the government out of the pyramid scheme business. We need to end it. We need to end all of this stuff. We need to get the government out of the cradle to grave game. When everybody now is getting elected by being Santa Claus and getting up there in front of the American people and saying, look, I'll give you this, I'll give you that, I'll give you the next thing. And everybody, all these politicians are tripping all over each other to just say who's got the bigger presence. If you're going to stand up in a time like this and say you're for freedom, you're going to get comments like that. So bring them on.
And we got one that says, I am for freedom. The Mensheviks were the minority, literally, versus the Lenists.
Okay. I mean, I'm not sure how to respond to that.
I'm not either.
But I mean, to me, all you got to be for freedom is to understand that you're in charge of yourself, right? I don't even want to be in charge of anybody else. I'm in charge of myself. I mean, if you ask me, Joe, if you say, Mark, well, what do you think I should do with my, I mean, I guess I'll give you some advice. I'll tell you what I think, but I would never try to run your life for you. I don't, and it doesn't matter to me if you're doing things that I disagree with. And that's an important point when you're talking about freedom, because what I found, and I talk to groups all the time, and this is what I was going to say. Now I got Joe on the phone, so I can say it. But, I got something to say to the pot smokers, and I speak to the NORML groups, which is the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. They're one of the best pro-legalization marijuana groups, and I know because I've been on their legal committee as long as I've been a lawyer. Let me say something to you, my friends. You are supporting ending the drug war because you smoke marijuana, and that's fantastic. Are you big enough to support freedoms for other people who do things that you do not do, who do things that you disagree with, who do things that you would completely not do, that you would recommend against, that you find immoral or even disgusting? That's the big boys of freedom. That's my question for everybody who says they're for freedom. Are you really for freedom? Are you part of the big boys and big girls for freedom? And that's really the answer to the question. Can you tolerate, can you support other competent adults doing peaceful things that you don't agree with?
You got your first politician caller starting off the show, right? We've got the Pinal County.
Don't we have some standards on this show, Bill? I'm sorry. All right, I take that.
We got the Pinal County tax assessor on the line, Douglas Wolf.
Fantastic. How you doing, Douglas?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
How are we doing in the tax assessment? How's the tax assessment doing?
5x5? I'm sorry. I'm talking over you. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I had a couple questions regarding, let's start with the drug war. Murder's illegal. Why?
Well, I think murder ought to be illegal, and the reason that murder ought to be illegal is because it is a very clear trespass on another person. It's the intentional taking of another human life. That's a trespass. So all trespasses ought to be illegal, not just murder, but assault and rape and robbery and burglary and theft and just in its purest form, trespass, walking across somebody's property without their permission. Look, I'm not somebody who doesn't support law. I support law. We just need to get our laws straight. If you show me a trespass, I'll show you something I disagree with.
What I'm asking, Mark, is there a moral component to why murder is illegal?
I think there's a moral, at its very basic root, there's a moral component to all laws. Even my assertion, when I say it's wrong to initiate force against other people, that's a moral proposition. I'm simply saying that's a good place to draw the line in terms of my morality. In other words, I may say, look, I find it immoral and I'm not saying this, by the way, but if I did, I would say, I just imagine, I would say, I find it immoral for a woman to engage in an act of prostitution. I might say that that's immoral, but if she's a competent adult and it's her body and she's engaging in an act with another competent adult, it's not my business, nor is it the proper business of the law because there's no trespass.
But can you have a society that's civilized without a moral component to the legal system?
Well, my suggestion is this. We do need a moral component to the legal system. Here it is. Thou shalt not initiate force against non-aggressors, period. Things that are moral questions beyond that, like honor your mother and father, and maybe don't covet, and things of that, and be nice to old ladies when they're crossing the street, those types of things. Those are moral matters that should not be part of the law. And so I don't think you have a legal obligation to help other people, but I think you might have a moral obligation to help other people, so I wouldn't enshrine that in the law. The law is the most basic moral premise that we all need to abide by to have a civilized society.
So you're saying that you're a follower of Immanuel Kant and the categorical imperative in all cases?
I'm not saying that at all. I'm a follower of...
What are you saying? You just said there's a moral component, but it has one basic premise. You just said that.
I'm a follower of Marc Victor and Marc Victor alone. I chart my own course.
You have your own moral philosophy that you think everyone else should follow.
No, I have my own moral philosophy that I follow, that I would never want to impose my morality on another person. In fact, I've got lots of friends who have completely different moral codes than me. The only requirement for us to be friends at a basic level is that we at least can agree not to hit each other over the head, or said another way, we can at least agree to not initiate force against each other. So this is a very important point, because I think a lot of people confuse legal issues with moral issues.
But the basis of all law, you've already admitted, is morality has a basic bearing and informs the law. You've already admitted to that.
I have admitted to that, and I'll say it again.
Yes, you did. Sure you did. And then you said, well, my moral authority is the one that Marc Victor has.
No, I think you misheard me. I'm agreeing with you that I did admit to that. What I've said is there's an underlying, what I'm saying is a basic moral concept that it is wrong to initiate force against other people. Now, unfortunately for me, most people don't agree with that, including you, because you support...
I did say I didn't agree with you. I'm just trying to understand your argument.
No.
And I don't think it's very clear. I don't think you have a clear moral basis for the way you're making your argument.
I was going to make my case for why I believe, at least with what little bit I know about you, maybe I'm completely wrong, but I don't think that you agree with that, because I suspect that you support taxation, and to me, a taxation is initiating force against other people. I would like to see a society, and I would work toward, and I will work tirelessly till my dying days, to try to get a completely voluntary society where nobody is initiating force against any person for any reason, including taxation, because that is an initiation of force against others. My goal on this show is to convince...
That's agreed upon by the majority of the people in our republic to have taxes. It's not forced from me on you. It's an agreement of the society to impose taxation. You can't make that argument. That's specious.
Well, I can make any argument I like, but what I was going to say is therein lies our disagreement. You've just stated something that I don't agree with, which is this. If the majority of people agree to do something, then it becomes moral. I don't agree with that. It doesn't matter to me what the majority of people...
I wasn't making that argument.
Sir, please,
can I... The reason we have taxation is because it's an agreed-upon issue of the society that voted on it. I didn't say it was a moral component.
Hey, I've got an idea. How about I'll say something, and then you say something, and then we'll go back and forth, rather than talking over each other. So what I'm saying is this.
You've had 25 minutes to pontificate here, and now I'm just putting my point out there, and you're running around the argument.
Well, maybe it'll be more fun to have you come in on the show, and we can go back and forth, and we can have equal time. I'd be happy to do that with you. I understand you're local here in Pinal County, so maybe we'll do that. But all I'm saying is this. The only moral concept that ought to be enshrined in our law is that thou shalt not initiate force against non-aggressors. I'm not saying, and I don't agree with a concept that says if the majority agrees to do something, whether it's taxation or whether it's health care or whatever it is, that by itself does not make it a moral act. I don't agree with that. That's where we're disagreeing. Go ahead.
I never said it was a moral act. I said it was an agreed-upon civilized society that puts on taxes, and it's not forcible taking if everyone agrees to the system, which currently we do have. Unless you want to have a revolution and go to anarchy where, you, like you said, you have a free and open, non-coercive society, well, that's okay if you can create that utopia. But we don't live in that utopia.
Well, we actually had a revolution here, and it didn't lead to anarchy. It led to probably the freest society we ever had back in 1776. So a revolution could be a good thing. I agree with Thomas Jefferson. We need to have a revolution from time to time. In fact, we need to have a revolution right now in the United States. Now, I'm saying this in the same vein that the founders of our nation said it, which was an intellectual revolution. We need to get to a place in our country where between our ears, we're understanding that initiation of force against non-aggressors is wrong. That's not a good thing. And really, we could test your theory about everybody agreeing by simply saying, let's have a real, not pretend, a real voluntary tax code. And that way, if people want to send their money, they can. And that way, if they don't, they won't. And then we'll really find out who agrees. Because I guess we both know the same thing. We're pretending it's voluntary. We're pretending everybody's agreed, but the truth is everybody has not agreed. In fact, nobody who's alive today even agreed to the Constitution. It was thrust upon them whether they liked it or not. Now, I'm not saying necessarily it's a bad document. What I am saying is that particular document, that Constitution, which was drafted up over 200 years ago, is something that can be interpreted any way the interpreter seeks to interpret. Right? We can agree on that, I'm sure. So,
well, I mean, if you want to get down the philosophy and of the epistemology of the words used in the Constitution, I guess you can. But the fact is, we have a system that's in place now. If you want a revolution to change it, fine. If you're advocating that, that's fine. You have a radio show and you can do that. But we have a system in place that says, okay, if we have a majority election and we have a republic and they vote for the taxation, you got to pay it. Now, that's coercive, but it may be immoral in your view, or maybe amoral in your view, but that's the system we have.
Yeah,
so
I'm
asking you, are you calling for a revolution? Should we overthrow our current constitutional government?
Well, first off, I wouldn't call it amoral. I'd call it immoral, because when you impose force against non-aggressors, that's not amoral, that's immoral, number one. Number two, we're going to have changes in our society whether we like it or not. And that includes me and that includes you. Whether you like it or not, the current system is absolutely 100% certain unsustainable. It is not sustainable, sir. It will not continue. At some point, the $16 trillion of debt, which is surely going to 25 soon, and plus the 4 times of unfunded liabilities beyond that the knuckleheads who are currently running our government under a system of majority agrees, and what they agree on is to steal from everybody else and fund others. Everybody's trying to get rich at the expense of their neighbor. That's going to end. Whether we like it or not, that is going to end. So the only question on the table at this moment is what's going to come next? Because I got news. We cannot keep marching in the direction of Obamacare and cradle-to-grave government taking care of everybody, which is the direction we're marching. And if you think that this is the big fiscal cliff coming up at the end of this year, you're in for a big surprise. The Soviet Union thought they were going to keep marching in that direction forever, and so did Greece, and so did all these other countries. But you know what? Governments end. They do. This government cannot keep marching down the same road it's marching down. So we need to start getting into a discussion, my friend, about what is going to take place after the big crash.
Okay, so then freedom's really not on the table, Mark. What you're saying is we should be talking about being preppers.
I didn't say anything about preppers. I think that we're going to have some kind of a major upheaval. I'm hoping that this will, and I will do everything within my power to try to help to make sure that this is nothing more than a major intellectual upheaval. But you know, our government is going to default on that debt. Anybody who thinks that the government's going to pay the debt down is just mistaken. They're going to default. The only 2 options are they're going to either completely say, sorry, we're not funding any of those unfunded liabilities and we're not paying back any of that debt, or they're going to default over time, which is called hyperinflation. And my guess, my money's on hyperinflation. Now, how exactly that plays out over time, I don't know. What I do know is this March is coming to an end. So I'm doing this show because I want to talk to people about a better way for us to live on the planet Earth. It's called freedom, which is you're in charge of you, I'm in charge of me. That way, if we accumulate debt, we do so individually. If we decide to do something harmful or bad, we do it individually. If somebody imposes on another person, that's where the law gets involved and takes care of that problem. That's reasonable to me, and I don't understand what the problem is with that. Why we've strayed so far from what I would call American principles. You could call me a radical if you like, but I believe with all of my heart that if Thomas Jefferson was sitting next to me, he'd be on my side.
Well, Jefferson died highly in debt too, I guess, just like the American Republic might. But when I say the preppers, and I don't mean that as a pejorative, in case anybody's curious, I'm saying if I follow your argument, freedom has been lost. We're already so far in debt we can't recover from it with the current liabilities and the $69 trillion that we have in unfunded liabilities. That we ought to just start buying gold and guns and putting food up on the shelves and say, well, this is where it's getting up, and maybe Mark Victor will be the last guy to tell us on the air that this is what we should have been doing.
Well, look, I don't tell other free people what to do with their lives. I mean, lots of people have already been buying gold. That's why it's up about 1,700. But lots of people are prepping. They can do whatever they like. Some people are prepping for completely unrelated problems they foresee coming up. So I don't tell free people what to do. I'm just stating something that's rather obvious, which is our country cannot keep marching in the direction that we've marched. And so the interesting thing about the last election, although I don't believe that Mr. Romney and Mr. Obama are really any different in any kind of a significant way, the one thing that was telling about this was at least a vote for Romney would have been a statement that we want something different than the course that we're currently on. And people voted for Obama. So they made a statement that was, look, we like exactly the course that we're on. That by itself is making me come to the realization. I mean, look, I'm a real American, okay? I don't want to lose my country. I served in the United States Marine Corps overseas in a combat zone. I'm a patriotic guy. I love my country. I love my freedom. It pains me to say the things that I need to say, but I think we need to come to grips with reality that the people who are currently running the government, and I'm including most of the current Republicans and most of the current Democrats, and the people who put them there, they aren't even interested in making the kind of radical changes that would be required to avert an oncoming complete financial collapse. So I think it's reasonable to conclude we're going to get change. It's not a matter of if we want change or not. I think I want change. I think it's time for change in any event, but change is coming, my friend. We need to start preparing for it. We need to, look, if you're for freedom, now is a good time to stand up and start talking about freedom, because the good news is there are some reasons to think that it might be a good time for freedom. As I've just pointed out, I think that we've seen the beginning of the end of the drug war, and I think that is a very encouraging thing for our country, because now if we're smart enough to make the argument, not the economic argument, which is a very convincing, a sufficient argument to make for ending the drug war. But if we make the better argument, the freedom argument, if we make the argument that, look, the reason the drug war needs to end is because people need to be in charge of themselves, and it's inappropriate, it's unconstitutional, it's immoral, and it's wrong for the government or people, even speaking as a majority, to impose their will on the individual. That's where we got some hope for freedom.
We got some interesting calls while you were on the line there, and I I couldn't take nearly a hundredth of them.
I wish we could take them all.
Let's go down a few of them here. And there's both sides here. Greatest show on the radio, The Victor Show. Manitoba, Canada, Roy.
Congrats to Canada.
Thank you, Roy.
Hey, you know what? We're all human. We're all in this fight together. We all need to be for freedom. It doesn't matter what side of the border you live on. It doesn't matter what side of the border you live on. We're all human. We need to be promoting freedom. And the second we get that, let's start promoting peace.
Frida, Boston, Massachusetts, says, I'm 64 years old. Never liked drugs or alcohol, but no one should tell us what to do. Be free.
Go Boston, my hometown, and go Patriots. We're going to beat the Texans on Monday night. In case I didn't mention it, I'm from Boston. Yeah. I graduated Randolph High School, born in Quincy, Mass. Good for the Bostonians. We need to be for freedom up there, too.
Celia, Fort Worth. She says, I'm LDS. This is our second LDS call here that said, I'm LDS first. I suppose you support gay marriage and abortion, too. You're nuts.
Hey, you know what I'm going to say back to my LDS friend out there? Somebody who may have been named Joseph Smith once said, teach them correct principles, but let them govern themselves. I follow what Joseph Smith said. Teach them correct principles, but let them govern themselves. If people want to get in bed together and have sex with other competent adults, that is their business. If they want to call themselves married, what business is it of yours or mine or anybody else? That doesn't mean we got to recognize it, right? I mean, I don't have to recognize something that somebody else does that I disagree with, and I'm not even taking a position on it. I'm just simply saying, as a man of freedom, as a man of peace, can we at least take the position that what our neighbors are doing in their bedroom is their business?
I mean, you know, the LDS, if they want to give 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% of their income to build these giant, massive, beautiful buildings that they do, that, I mean, more power to them. I mean, you know what? If we have a compound in the future, we'll throw in our income and build some giant buildings too.
Let me say this. This to my LDS friends, I am not LDS. I'm a follower of Joseph Smith in this regard, but I am not LDS. However, let me make the point. The reason I'm saying this is because I'm not LDS. If the government ever got involved and said, we are going to curtail the activities of the Mormon Church, Mark J. Victor, non-LDS as he is, would be the #1 first guy in line telling the government to stay away from the Mormon Church.
That's right.
That's what freedom's about. If I was a Mormon saying this, that's less impressive to me, right? As people of freedom, we need to stand up for things that other people do that are peaceful, that we do not do ourselves. I'm calling on the non-pot smoking people to call for legalization of marijuana. I'm calling for the non-gay crowd to stand up for rights for gay people. I'm talking for the gay crowd. Get up there and support the rights of gun owners to have guns. We need to get up and be in the big leagues of freedom and stop being a bunch of whiny, wimpy, baby Americans.
Rin Sheldner from Shreveport, Louisiana says, I am ready with my still and reserves. You're a visionary. You're my new hero.
Wow, that's a good call. But you know what? I'm just repeating the stuff. I'm just trudging out the hard work that was done by those who had the guts to do something I don't know that I would be able to do today, to sign that Declaration of Independence and send it to King George III, the most powerful army in the world, and say, you know what? We're free. Send your army, send your men. We're standing up for freedom. I don't know if we can do that today. I don't know if we got those kind of people here today, but all I'm doing is trying to keep that alive.
You know what? For your show, we're doing away with the key rings. We're doing away with the, all that stuff, because what I'm going to do is order life-sized those Coroplast stand-up Mark Victors doing this, and you're going to sign them. We'll give those away. What do you think? People can have them in their home all over the world.
Joe, get something out of my wife before this show. Get her to say something on this
Trace,
station. Come on, Trace, you can do it. You got something to say about this drug war.
You can do it. All right,
She's not ready yet. She's not ready yet. She's coming. She's coming.
I'm going to take a couple more calls.
Oh, I guess the call is not coming on right now. All right, so anyways, I hope people get a feel of what we're talking about on this show. We're not make pretend. We're not just using the word freedom for the fun of using the word freedom. We're doing the heavy lifting for freedom, right? Freedom is made and won at the edges, just like a criminal defense lawyer. I represented Elizabeth Johnson. People said, Mark, why would you defend her, this baby Gabriel case? You know what? It's a hard case. It's an unpopular client. It's the very first place people want to cut corners. That's the first place I want to stand up. I seek out difficult cases. I seek out the ones at the edges. That's where you make the stand. Can you be big enough to say competent adults have a right to even use methamphetamine if they want? I mean, the truth of the matter is, this isn't as big a problem as we actually think. Very few people actually die from the use of methamphetamine. I'm in no way am I saying that this is a good thing. But methamphetamine, I believe, would go away completely if we just legalize drugs. If you go to Amsterdam, where drugs are readily available, they don't even have methamphetamine. They don't even know what it is. Methamphetamine is simply a substitute. And the same can be said if methamphetamine, if we could snap our fingers and close all the meth labs today and make it so there was never another ounce of methamphetamine on the planet, the meth users aren't going to all curl up into a ball in the corner of the room and say, well, shucks, I guess there's no more meth for me to use. I'm going to lead a clean and sober life. They're just going to find another drug. The problems of addiction are problems of addiction. They're medical problems. They're health problems. They're not problems that need to be in the justice system unless somebody interferes with the rights of another person. Show me that, and I'll show you a real criminal case. I'll show you a place to intervene and get involved.
And remember, guys, when you call in, there's absolutely no reason to yell at me. I mean, yeah, I'm probably not going to hang up on you, but you can even talk loud. Just don't yell at me. I hate that. Robert Zeus from, I believe he said Mulberry, Maine. He said, tell me, you support polygamy? You support prostitution, that's okay? You're saying it should be legal to have multiple wives. That's what you're saying?
You know, that's such an easy one. It's really...
I mean, that's really easy, isn't
Joe,
it?
I got to say, you know, it's really difficult for me to get my mind around why people have so much problem with this. I mean, look, if you're not in favor of polygamy, don't be in a polygamous relationship.
Call it a harem.
Avoid polygamous relationships if you don't want to be in one. But I would say to my friend in Maine, who are you to tell your neighbor he can't have multiple wives or multiple husbands or multiple whatever he wants to have, as long as he's not interfering with you?
His group they're advocates against prostitution.
Well, that's fine, and don't use a prostitute. Don't be a prostitute, and don't hire a prostitute, and then you won't have prostitution in your life. I guess the thing that maybe it's this. Maybe it's a lack of self-confidence to communicate to your children how you want them to be raised. I don't have any problem with that. See, I don't worry about messages from government. The government can tell people they could use methamphetamine if they want. That doesn't bother me in a bit in terms of how I communicate with my kids. Tracy can tell you, we are very clear with our kids. I don't look to messages from government. I'm a dad, and I do my job as a dad. It's my responsibility to speak to my kids and raise them with the proper guidance and morals that I want. So I'd say to my friend in Maine, it's perfectly consistent to say to your children, look, little Bobby or Johnny or Sally or whatever your kid's name is, look, even though the government is allowing polygamy, they're allowing one man to marry 10 wives, we think that's wrong. And here's why we think it's wrong. But how wonderful to be able to add, even though we think it's wrong, he's a free man.
That would put most people in the nut house anyway.
You know, yeah, absolutely. I mean, why somebody would want to do that might be another question for another show. But how wonderful to say to your child, look, here's what we believe. Here's the way I'm raising you. Here's why we believe it. But at the same time, the world is filled with people who believe other things. And as long as they're peaceful with what they're doing, they're allowed to live however they want. And why hide it from your kids? Why are we trying so hard to impose our morality on other people through the law? Go ahead, Trace.
Well, what I would say is for guys that do want 2 wives, 3 wives, good luck with that. And where does it end? Does it end with how many kids you can have, how many dogs? Where does it end, I would say, not just with your husbands or your wives, but the government should be out of our lives. Keep it in your home with your children, and just keep the government out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I mean, where does it end? I mean, you know, this person in Maine has their own particular moral code. There's people in L.A. who have moral codes, and people in Louisiana have moral codes. Is that really the purpose of government, to have everybody fighting and scratching and tripping all over themselves to try to impose their moral view? And what I would say, look, is your moral view so devoid of a persuasive argument that you have to try to cram it down the throats of other people? If your moral view, if your view in terms of how you should conduct yourself and live on the planet Earth is so good and persuasive, then don't worry about the government cramming it down people's throats. Take it to your neighbor and persuade them.
Another thing I would add is we're actually living the way that Mark is almost saying is we really don't know what's going on in people's lives, even our neighbors. You'll see even sometimes on the news, you'll see things about crazy people putting, their kids in the closet. When you're just walking down the street, walking your dog, and they're waving at you and you think everything's fine. The truth is you don't know what's going on in the world with your neighbors, with people, and just keep it at that. Just worry about yourself and no one else.
Yeah, I mean, if people are just being peaceful, if they're just running their lives and they're being peaceful, if they're living in ways that we disagree with, ways that we don't approve, ways that we find immoral, why can't we just speak out? Why aren't we happy just to speak out against it rather than to try to get somebody with a shiny badge
You know what,
to
Mark?
come down to the house with a gun and stick it to their head at the end of the day and say, you better stop?
I never could have imagined how many real things there are you can think about. I mean, there's billions of them, but
Endless.
To Jennifer in Nashville, Tennessee, I had to just say, really? Really? She says, how can you think that MSG and red dye number 5 or 9 should not be illegal? This is ridiculous.
It's actually it's a great question. Let's just change it to product X. And of course, fraud is something that ought to be illegal because to me, fraud is a form of a trespass. And so what's so bad about companies saying, look, here's a product we're bringing to market. This product has this particular item in it, or this product does not have this particular item in it, and then the market can decide because whatever the things are she doesn't like, and I'm kind of a health nut myself. I probably don't like those things, but there may be other people out there who aren't convinced by that argument. There might be other people out there who like that particular
Some people may just do that. They may just use everything with MSG because they love it.
I mean,
they love how it makes them feel.
It's kind of like saying, look, I don't drink carbonated sodas because I think they're pretty bad. There's lots of sugar. The carbonation is really bad for you. There's no nutritional value. They're really horrible. They're some of the worst foods ever
I
invented.
got scared you were going to take mine.
They're really bad. So I don't drink those. It's very, very rare. Tracy and I have been together probably, 6 and a half, almost 7 years. There might be 1 or 2 occasions when she saw me drink a root beer or something. I don't know.
Cream soda.
Maybe cream soda. I don't know.
Gotcha.
But, who am I to impose my views? Even if I could completely convince you that it's bad. You might say, look, Mark, you've convinced me there's no nutritional value. It's really bad for me. But it's still your choice. I still respect you, and it's your body, and you got a right to drink that stuff. You got no right to pour it down my throat. But you know what? I respect it. I'd be the first guy out in line to say if Joe wants to drink unhealthy sodas, the government should stay away, just like this other.
Jennifer wouldn't come on from Nashville, but she was saying, bet when you go to a Chinese place, they put this stuff in and they don't tell you. But you already know that.
Well,
right? So make your own Chinese food.
But there are places now, Chinese food especially,
that say no MSG.
They're advertising,
and there's a
that.
lot of products that advertise that.
That's the beauty of the market, and that's really a problem, Joe. We need to talk about this on some future shows because a lot of the problems that we have are as a result of people really not understanding the way the market works. They don't have any confidence in capitalism, and it's just like this issue here. If there are enough people in the market who feel like she feels, Jennifer out in Tennessee, if people feel like that, then what happens is that's a signal to Chinese food restaurants. Say, hey, there's a percentage of the market that doesn't like MSG.
And we're losing that money.
Why don't we advertise no MSG? And then that's how the market works. What's wrong with that?
Believe it or not, we are out of time.
And it works that way without any regulation.
Yes, it does.
Fantastic. I can't wait to our next show.
I mean, this was like a 2-minute, 1-hour show, huh?
It sure
went
was.
by so quickly.
Joe, we should say this next week. We're going to have Professor Butler Schaefer, constitutional law professor from Southwestern University, the person who turned me from a Rush Limbaugh, Ronald Reagan Republican into the hardcore, no compromise, pro-freedom guy that I am today. And it's going to be really exciting I can't wait for you to meet Butler Schaefer.
Sounds like a great show. Looking forward to it, guys. Next Thursday at 1 o'clock, the Attorney for Freedom show. Mark J. Victor, thank you so much. Thank you, Tracy, for coming in today. Dad, of course, sitting in. Appreciate that.
Hey, Joe, I should say this, too. We're so grateful for you to give us this opportunity to have this show. You're a great warrior for freedom, so more power to you, brother.
Thank you, Mark.
Freedom is the answer. What's the question. You have been listening to the Attorney for Freedom radio show, hosted by the original man of peace and high-profile attorney for freedom, Marc J. Victor. See you next week, same time, for another dose of freedom. Until then, peace out.
As a small business owner, you need to make every dollar count. Phone services are the first